And we're back after a stress-free weekend for you Pitt football fans. Nothing happened this weekend for Pitt football. Panthers were done playing a long time ago. They played their game days before the weekend even hit. And even though nothing that really helped Pitt happened over the weekend, it was a good weekend because Pitt did not lose. Panthers went into the weekend undefeated. They came out of the weekend undefeated. And at 7-0, they're firmly in the top 20, although we'll talk about the rankings, heading into a huge matchup against SMU on Saturday, which we will also talk about with a very interesting betting line and a very interesting TV assignment. And they're sitting right there at the top of the ACC, one of 4 undefeated teams in conference play so far, one of 2 teams that are undefeated overall, and one of 4 teams that are undefeated in conference play. They've played the fewest games, so I guess technically you could say they're 4th out of those 4, having only played 3 conference games, but they've played all those conference games, have not lost one yet, and they'll get their biggest test yet this Saturday night when they go to Dallas to take on SMU. It's a huge game, a huge week. We're going to be building up to this game all week. Just like last week, we were building up to the Syracuse game all week, and really for the 5 days before that. This week, we're going to be building up to this SMU game. This is the biggest game of the season for Pitt so far. And kind of like we talked about last week, when you're undefeated and you keep winning, every game becomes the biggest game of the season. And whatever stakes there were, whatever was riding on the Syracuse game for Pitt, however high however high the stakes were for that game, they're even higher now. And if they beat SMU, the stakes for the Virginia game next week will be even higher. This is when you get into this territory where you're undefeated and you're in the second half of the season, is 7-0 record. This is where you're living now, the land of high stakes, a whole lot at risk, where the reward is very high, but the risk is pretty high as well. This is a monster week for Pitt, a monster game coming up. We got a lot to talk about to get the week started. We're going to talk about the rankings. We're going to talk about the TV assignment, whether Pitt should take some disrespect from that. We're going to talk about the poll or the betting line, which I think is very interesting at where it opened, what Pitt needs to do to try to pull off what right now looks like it'll be an upset, as Pitt is the underdog heading into this game, and why all of those things, TV assignment, rankings, betting line, all of those things are absolutely going to fuel the fire. And Pat Narduzzi will absolutely lean on those things this week, because there's no respect is better than disrespect. And Pitt's getting a bit of it. It's certainly enough that they can use to try to manufacture some extra intensity. It was a big weekend for Pitt in that the Panthers didn't have to do anything. They just got to ride out through the weekend and go 7-0. And all the results that they were hoping for I don't know if they were hoping for, if they care at all the results that would have helped them in terms of the polls didn't really come to pass. But that's okay, because they're still in the position they're in, which is, as we say, 7-0. Let's talk about the weekend that was, even though Pitt didn't do anything and Pitt was off. Let's talk about where the Panthers are heading into this huge week and this game at SMU on Saturday. We got a lot to get your week started here on the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, it was a fun weekend for Pitt to be off. Just got to sit back, watch games, relax, take it easy, not have to get too worked up about any. There were certainly outcomes that I think you wanted to see. I mean, all these teams that were in the polls right around Pitt, Kansas State and Boise State and Ole Miss, all the way up to I forget who was even 16 or 15. Doesn't ultimately. Boise State, Ole Miss, Alabama, Kansas State, even up to A&M at number 14. I mean, there are a lot of outcomes that could have helped Pitt climb in the polls. I mean, we knew where they were going into the weekend. We knew that they were already 7-0, and so any of those teams that I just mentioned losing could have given Pitt a boost and a chance to climb a few spots from where they were at number 19 last week. And every single one of those teams won. Even A&M, who was number 14, hosting number 8 LSU, won. So nothing worked out. Nothing helped Pitt. But the pollsters, in their infinite wisdom, the Associated Press voters, actually did move Pitt up one spot from 19 to 18. They flipped them with Ole Miss, who Ole Miss did not lose, but they did come into, they do have 2 losses. And so I think you would have had, you'd like to think there was some sort of crisis of conscience of should we really have a 2-loss team ranked ahead of an undefeated team? And at least in terms of Ole Miss, the AP voters decided no, you should not. Now, Alabama is still ranked ahead of Pitt, and they have 2 losses. LSU, who, like I said, was number 8, they lost to Texas A&M on the road in College Station. They fell to number 16, so still a 2-loss team ranked ahead of Pitt. Alabama climbed a spot, actually, from 15 to 14. So Pitt right now at number 18 in the polls has 2 teams that have 2 losses ahead of them, as well as 6 undefeated teams. And then you can do the rest with 17 teams are ranked ahead of Pitt. 2 have 2 losses, 6 are undefeated. So that means another 9 or 1-loss teams all ranked ahead of Pitt. As it stands, there are 8 undefeated teams in the country. Army is one of them at 7-0, and Army is ranked number 21. That's the only undefeated team ranked lower than Pitt. At number 18, Pitt is the second lowest ranked undefeated team. They're the lowest ranked team, undefeated team, I should say, from a power conference. And I went back and looked through, like, back to 2000. And I can't swear that this is entirely accurate. I might have missed one somewhere along the way. But as far as I could tell, the lowest a power conference team has ever been ranked with a 7-0 record is in 2012, Rutgers was number 18. And so matching where Pitt is this week in terms of a power conference team. And back then, 2012, Rutgers was in the Big East. And so, that was a power conference team. But I think they were still in the Big East. I don't think they'd moved to the Big Ten yet because I think they played Pitt. But either way, they were in a power conference, and we'll count that. You could go back also in 2006. Rutgers was 7-0. They were ranked number 16. But the lowest a power conference team has been ranked with a 7-0 record since the year 2000 was Rutgers at number 18 in 2012. So Pitt effectively tied the lowest ranking for a 7-0 team from a power conference with this number 18 ranking this week. And I think there's a lot of things at play there. I think there's a lot of reasons why Pitt is ranked there, why Pitt is not getting more respect for its undefeated record. One is where they started. They were completely off the radar, not even receiving votes at the beginning. You could look at Miami. Miami doesn't really have, I don't think Miami's resume is all that impressive. The Hurricanes are 8-0, and they're number 5 in the country. Well, they started off in the preseason ranked, where were they? Number 19. So they started at 19, and they were able to climb as they stayed undefeated. Trying to look and see if any other undefeated teams here. Indiana would be one that started unranked, and they've managed to climb their way up to number 13. But that's probably a case where Indiana looks really impressive, and this is the other part of it. So Pitt is undefeated, but they did start the season completely unranked and not receiving votes. And while they've built this undefeated record, and they've defeated 2 power conference teams in the non-conference schedule, they're perfect, obviously, through the ACC schedule, they haven't looked quite as impressive as, Indiana. Just for example, and Indiana's 8-0. I think Indiana looks really good, and I think they're impressive. They're getting a little extra credit because they're in the Big Ten, and Pitt is probably dinged a little bit for being in the ACC, but Indiana looks really good. So I think there's an element of that. You needed 2 last-minute, heroics to beat Cincinnati and West Virginia. You looked fine against Carolina. Didn't look great offensively against Cal or Syracuse for that matter. Even though you had all these heroics and fireworks defensively, you didn't really wow anyone with your offense in those 2 games. And so if the AP voters are paying attention, look, if they're just like glancing at the scores and seeing that Pitt won 41-13 against a conference opponent, then they should have moved them up further. But I'm guessing they looked a little bit closer, maybe even watched the game on Thursday night and said, this team's undefeated. And obviously, they, if they can get 3 pick sixes every game, then they're going to have a pretty good chance to stay undefeated and be a playoff team. But the reality is they probably won't get that, and I'm not so sure about this offense right now, which is a valid concern, one that is probably shared by a lot of Pitt fans. And that's probably why they're only ranked number 18 this week, despite being 7-0 out of a power conference. Now, I will say, and certainly, I think a lot of people are saying this and echoing this sentiment, and and they should, and we probably can't say it enough that it doesn't matter where they're ranked right now. It doesn't matter that they're ranked 18 right now. The reality is, if they keep winning, this will take care of itself. The rankings will take care of it. They're talk show fodder. I mean, like, look, we've spent the first, how long? The first 10 minutes of this video, of this podcast, just talking about the rankings. And that's all. That's the only purpose they serve right now. It's total navel-gazing nonsense that doesn't ultimately matter, other than, like, it looks cool. And you can tout it, like, Pitt is number 10 or something if they were to climb into the top 10 or whatever. You can make a big deal out of it, but it ultimately doesn't matter. The only poll that actually matters is the college football playoff rankings when those come out in a couple of weeks. We're not there yet. And by the time those come out, Pitt's going to have an opportunity to continue building its record, building its resume, and making itself look more impressive. And that's what will ultimately matter. And that's the thing. These like polls and rankings will take care of themselves. If you take care of business, the rankings will take care of themselves. They will. And it doesn't matter if you're getting disrespected right now, save for the motivation side. And we'll come back to that in a second. The other thing we got this weekend, it was very, very late Saturday night. It was actually early Sunday morning. We got a game time and a TV assignment for Pitt's next game. Panthers will be at SMU on Saturday. We knew that, but we didn't know when that game would happen or how we would be able to watch it. And we thought we would get this answer a week ago, and then they put it on a 6-day hold. They put every ACC game this coming Saturday on a 6-day hold. Really waiting until the last minute to decide what time these games would be played and what TV station they would be on. Pitt and SMU. 2 7-win teams. Panthers undefeated at 7-0. Mustangs 7-1. Both top 20 teams. Wait, where did SMU end up? They're at number 20 in the polls this week. They were 22 last week. Pitt was 19. But 2 ranked opponents, 2 ranked teams, one undefeated and one 7-1, playing each other in a huge game with conference implications and national implications. And you can watch it on the ACC network. 8 p.m. kickoff, ACC network. Now, I think there's 2 schools of thought with the decision to put it on the ACC network. One school of thought is what I just said. This is a matchup of ranked teams, a one-loss team and an undefeated team. Huge conference implications. Both undefeated in conference play. Huge national implications as 2 teams that could be a real, have an opportunity to crack into that college football playoff ranking when it comes out. And so a lot riding on this game. This is an attractive matchup, an exciting offense, exciting players at SMU, and then, some exciting offensive players at Pitt, followed with, really exciting defensive performance in their last outing. So because it's such an appealing matchup, ESPN, the ACC trying to drive the value of the ACC network, get more eyeballs on the ACC network. They want to put a premium matchup there, an appealing, attractive matchup with national implications and national relevance. And so that's one school of thought, that they're trying to drive traffic and eyeballs to the ACC network. The other school of thought is that they just defaulted to screw it. Let's put Clemson on at the 7:30 time slot on, where's that game? That game's on like ESPN. Let's just do that. And because that's what we always do. We just always put Clemson in the main spot. So it's like Clemson Louisville. I forget. I want to bring up that game just to confirm where it is. It's at Clemson, 7:30 on ESPN. I don't get it. I mean, it would seem like Pitt SMU is the premier matchup in the ACC this week, but they're going to the ACC network. Again, maybe it's to drive eyeballs to the ACC network. Maybe it's to try and get more views there. Or maybe it's just, again, defaulting to putting Clemson in a prime spot. And then the final thing about this game, and like looking at ESPN just now, they said the line is 7.5. From what I've seen, like looking at scoresandodds.com, and I think most people have seen that the line opened around 6.5. I think it opened at 6.5. As of last night, as of Sunday night, the last time I looked before I recorded this, it was down to 5.5. Now, That line of 6.5 is pretty remarkable because I think it's a lot bigger than anybody expected it to be. And the fact that there's already been movement from 6.5 to 5.5 tells me that a lot of people in the public, which maybe is not a good thing, a lot of people in the public wanted to get Pitt at 6.5 because they felt like that was a good bet. That getting Pitt plus 6.5 was a bet that was likely to pay off, and so the line already moved to 5.5 less than 24 hours after it came out. Or less than, no, I shouldn't say less than 24 hours after it came out. Less than 24 hours after the last game was played. Let's say it that way. But that's a big line. And I'm not sure what's behind that. There could be concerns about Eli Holstein's injury situation, although I think those are largely unfounded. I know he left the last game with something, but I sort of feel like I think he's going to play. I think Pat Narduzzi said it after the game. He'll be fine, and I tend to believe that to be true. So, but maybe that influenced the line a bit and got it to be 6.5. I mean, it's not like SMU looked all that impressive at Duke on Saturday night. They looked pretty sloppy, quite frankly. Kevin Jennings is an exciting player. Brashard Smith is an exciting running back. But they looked pretty sloppy and they looked susceptible. And it was a game that Duke had every chance to win. It almost sort of felt like the Pitt-Cal game a little bit, just in the sense of the favored team, the team that ultimately won, tried to give it away a bunch of times, and just the other team, the Duke or the Cal, were just unable to seize the opportunity and take advantage and actually win the game. Which, I mean, I think I was all too willing, and most of us were all too willing to write off Pitt's game against Cal as, well, you're going to have a clunker sometimes. That's what happens. If you're going to have a really good season, you're going to have a clunker or two that you still end up winning. And that's what that was for Pitt. And I mean, I think, SMU would probably say the same thing about their game against Duke. So, I don't think we change our perception of SMU all that much based on that game against Duke, that we think, oh, they're not that good. But I do think we look at it and say they can be had. They can be got. You can force Kevin Jennings into bad decisions. If you could shut down the running game, you'll really put pressure on Jennings. He can obviously make plays with his legs, but you can force him into making bad decisions with some of his throws. We'll get into more of that as the week goes on. I think that was the main takeaway from that game Saturday night. But coming out of that game Saturday night, for the line to still be around that 6.5 range, very interesting. I'm not really sure what to make of that. But here's what I do think. All right, and I won't take credit for this. Someone else pointed this out to me or suggested it to me, and I think there's something to it. So Pitt inches up in the polls from 19 to 18. Lowest ranked undefeated power conference team. Second lowest ranked undefeated team overall. Barely inch up. Premium matchup against another ranked opponent, a one-loss team against an undefeated, and it gets dumped on the ACC network. And then when the betting line comes out, and I don't know how much this will be touched on, but you might as well dabble in it. It favors SMU by 6.5. All of that can very easily, with not a lot of bending over backwards, not a lot of difficulty, all of that can be turned into can be used as fuel for disrespect. And I think Pat Narduzzi, I think he's pretty good at playing the disrespect card. I think he's pretty good at firing up his team of everybody's counting you out. Nobody thinks you can win. Nobody thinks that you're as good as your record. Everybody thinks that you're a soft 7-0. And he'll never say that to us. I don't think he'll ever say that to us. He's said a few things this year that have surprised me, but I don't think he'll actually go that far to actually say it to us in the media. But to his team, to the players, when he wants to get them going, maybe it'll be through the week. Maybe it'll be on game day. But I think that message is going to be out there. Look at this, guys. You're 7-0. The only other 7-0 team that's ranked lower than you is Army. Every 7-0 team from a power conference, they're ahead of you. And not just that, but you're like big-time showdown. I mean, you are playing a one-loss team. You are playing a team with an undefeated conference record, a ranked team. You are a ranked team. And the best they'll do, they'll dump you on the ACC network. They don't think anybody wants to watch this game. They don't believe in you. They don't think you're as good as your record says you are. And in fact, they actually think you're going to lose by a touchdown or more. And I mean, certainly Narduzzi would use far more colorful language than that. But it's absolutely something he can, and I would assume he will, use to motivate this team. They're counting you out. They don't think you can do it. They don't think you're any good. I think he did. I mean, like, I think there's a clip of him before the Clemson game in 2016 giving that kind of talk. I'm sure he's given it on a few occasions. And this will be the one. This will be the one where you really get them locked in. And you know what? Maybe you don't just wait. Maybe you don't wait until Saturday to bring it up. Maybe, yeah. I was going to say maybe you talk it up through the week to really make sure you get full focus and effort in practice. But at the same time, I don't think you want to talk about it too much through the week because you don't want to tempt them to go look at those things. Although, I think it's pretty clear these players do look at this stuff. They look at the betting lines, and they not for betting purposes, of course, but they look at the betting lines. They look at the what's being said. They look at the polls. They look at all of those things, and so they'll be aware of it. But I think maybe it's something you bring out on game day to try and motivate them. I know I would. And as far as like being focused through practice this week, I tend to think when a team wins as much as Pitt has, at this point, they probably have a pretty good idea of what they need to do from Sunday to Friday to make sure that what they do on Saturday gives them the best possible result. If they were 3-0, 4-0, I'd say, well, you don't know. Are they going to keep enough focus? Are they going to feel like they could just walk on the field and beat a team? What are they, how are they, how are they going to approach it? And it's dicey at that point. But I think once you get to 7-0, you've got a real sense of, one, what's at stake in these games, and two, what it really takes to win games. And I think that's probably where this team is right now. That's my assumption. I mean, we'll know the results will tell us what's if that's really the case. We'll know on Saturday night. But that's kind of my assumption that they have an idea of what it takes to win. And they know what's at stake, and so I think that's going to keep that focus level up. Real quick, last thing, Pitt volleyball, 2 big matches over the weekend again. This time the Panthers had Louisville on, I think it was Friday night, right? Louisville Friday night. Louisville is ranked 4th in the country. Pitt beat Louisville in a 5th set. Pretty impressive. Look, Louisville is such a challenge, man. I mean, they're just really good, and they give Pitt. They continue to give Pitt, and they have for a few years now, give Pitt everything they can handle. And sometimes Pitt comes out on top, and sometimes they don't. This time they did. When they meet again in the regular season, or the penultimate game of the regular season on the road on November 27th, that'll be an interesting one because this Louisville team's tough. And there were some incredible volleys. I mean, I don't know if you watched. If you haven't watched, I mean, let me just say this. If you're not watching Pitt volleyball right now, I highly recommend that you do. It's really exciting. I mean, it's exciting stuff. First of all, I mean, the team is really good. They're fun to watch. The athleticism is through the roof. And it's an exciting sport. And there are a few arcane rules, but for the most part, it's pretty easy to tell what's going on. Hit the ball back and forth. Did it go out or is it in? That's, every now and then there's some things they have to get into just to explain what's going on, but that's pretty much the long and short of it. And so it's easy to follow. It's exciting. There's a lot of action. And the Louisville game, I think if you watch the Louisville game, particularly in the 5th set, where there were some extended volleys and the women were just laying out for it. If you watch that, I think you would be hooked. But anyway, big win for Pitt there to beat Louisville 3-2. And then on Sunday, they got Notre Dame at the Field House. It was sold out, and Pitt won that one 3-1. They won the first 2 sets. Notre Dame took the 3rd set, but Pitt bounced back and took care of business in the 4th set. And now we're coming up to it. I mean, there's a month of games left. Just kind of counting real quick here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 more games. Pitt will close the season at the Fieldhouse against Georgia Tech on November 30th. And then it's into the postseason. This team right now is 19-1. They have Virginia on November 1st, whatever day that is. That's their next match. That's on Friday. Sorry, I should know that. It's at Virginia on Friday, the day after Halloween. But watch. I mean, all these games are on ACC Network or ACC Network Extra. They're all streaming through ESPN. You can watch them all, and I highly recommend that you do. It's a lot of fun. The team is outstanding. They might have like in terms of just pure athleticism, like there's probably as much on the volleyball team as there is on any other sport at Pitt. Or realistically, like they jump through the roof. I mean, if you watch that interview with Olivia Babcock last Friday, or 2 Fridays ago, I guess it was. I asked her, "Can you dunk a basketball?" And she's like, "Well, I can dunk a volleyball. I've never tried with a basketball." So I mean, yeah, she's got that kind of athleticism. You look at the hits and the speed, the serves and the spikes. I mean, it's considerable athleticism. The body control to make some of the plays they make, the touch to set up some of the passes. It's really fun to watch. It's pretty exciting to watch. It's fun, and they're really good. So I mean, you like to support a winner, right? Well, they're ranked number 1 in the country. So I would highly recommend checking it out. We'll keep up with them as they go on this march toward what they hope will be a national championship and another return to the Final Four and whatever else they might be able to pull off. So good stuff there. It was a good weekend for Pitt. No losses, all wins. And the men's soccer team too. So everything's going well for Pitt right now, but we all know everything is gearing up toward Saturday night in Dallas at SMU. Huge game. Looking forward to it. I'm sure you are as well, and we will be talking about it all week, building up to this, building up to that game, and we'll be talking about it here on the Morning Pitt on YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We have our weekly live show every Wednesday night. We'll be live after the SMU game, and all of those things happen right here at YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So like this video and subscribe, and that way you don't miss any of our Pitt video content. And check out the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com for all the Pitt sports news you can possibly handle. All right, hope you had a great weekend. Hope your week gets off to a great start today, and we'll catch up with you tomorrow morning for the Morning Pitt right here on YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com.